Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York City, just like I pictured it, presented in conjunction with the Van Alen Institute as part of their fall program festival. Tonight, we celebrate making it, or sometimes, well, maybe oftentimes, barely making it, in this town of ours, New York City. We are the Knights of Our Lives, a storytelling troupe based out of the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and tonight, our performers will share with you all true stories from their lives. Everything you are about to hear is 100% true, because why would we want to make any of this up? Our storyteller's inspiration for this evening, only the city that never sleeps, Potsdam, New York. Oh my God. Oh, I'm teasing. The city that never sleeps is New York. Nothing sacred tonight, folks. Not even that quaint little town of Potsdam. I got you in my sights, okay? So buckle up. Druids from the misty haze of prehistory once prophesied that if you could make it in New York, you could make it anywhere. So watch out, slums of Mumbai. Here come the students of the Dalton School. And hey, Jupiter, your highly toxic gaseous atmosphere don't scare this city slicker none. I've survived 2 bedbug infestations and took my landlord to court to get my security deposit back. Bring on the high density core, bitch. I'm a New Yorker. But not everyone understands why we stick it out in a city where rent checks can exceed the GDP of Honduras and where cockroaches can sublet in a pinch. Not everyone has the intestinal fortitude to persevere and make it in the Big Apple, especially if you have a gluten allergy and the Big Apple is made of pure wheat. People never ask me, David, what drives you to keep making it in New York? And by the way, if we may say ourselves, you're doing a remarkable job. Well, thank you, hypothetical people. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to hear, because don't hear it that often. But if these people did ask, I would tell them it's a long story, and it begins something like this. The year was 1973. It was the Vietnam War, and I was doing undercover ops in Laos. My handler was a man named Mr. Chong. We ran a gun smuggling operation across the border. One day I showed up at our usual meet only to be greeted by North Vietnamese troops. I'd been double-crossed. Mr. Chong had betrayed me for a child bride and a pair of blue jeans. I spent 5 years in a VC prison camp. I ate toenails. I shed blood for the entire first season of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. My best friend was a tapeworm I named Theodore. The one thing that sustained me was the knowledge that one day I would get back at Mr. Chong, and I did. 30 years later, I tracked him down to a boutique coffee shop in the West Village. He was there for a tasting, trying to see if he could differentiate between Jamaica Blue Mountain and Kona Gold. I snuck up behind him and shoved his hand in a coffee grinder. God, tracking you down has been a real grind, I slyly observed, as bone and blood splattered the countertop. Next, I poured a freshly made latte on Mr. Chong's face. Hope I'm not making you latte for your next cup of coffee, I said ironically, because I didn't care if he was latte or not. Then I grabbed hold of a nearby cheese grater and began to grate off Mr. Chong's skin. That feels a little grating, doesn't it? I asked with a smirk. Mr. Chong begged for mercy, claimed that I had the wrong man, that he was born in this country and had never been to Vietnam. Sure, I scoffed as I slammed a window pane over his head. You really are a pain in the neck. I then took a pair of explosive dice and rolled them into his mouth. Looks like the die has been cast, I offhandedly remarked as his face blew up. That night, as I dismembered Mr. Chong, it occurred to me that I had killed the wrong man. This Mr. Chong, yes, it's a true story. You should gasp like that. This Mr. Chong had blonde hair and blue eyes, while the man I knew from Nam was Asian. Epic fail, right? Yeah, you could say I had egg on my face, as well as some brain and bone marrow. Just another colossal screw-up and a long line of failures for one David Martin. I felt sorry for myself. I thought about giving up right then and there, leaving New York and the vigilante life I had built here. I could have said, no more revenge killings. I could have put down the blowtorch and hacksaw and traded them in for a 9-to-5 job with a 401k and Cadillac healthcare plan. I could have listened to the court-appointed psychiatrist who said I needed to be heavily medicated. I could have let the city beat me. There's a happy ending to this story, folks. No, I haven't found the right Mr. Chong yet. I don't even know if that's important anymore. What is important is that I haven't given up trying. I'm going to get you, Mr. Chong, or at least someone who looks vaguely similar to you. Does this mean I'm making it in New York? Look, I didn't come here to brag, but yeah, I'd say I'm doing pretty darn well. And you know who else is making it? Our stellar lineup of storytellers we have for you this evening. First up, no gratuitous applause, only earned applause. First up is the remarkable Ophira Eisenberg. She's the author of the memoir Screw Everyone, and she's the frequent host of the MOTH Storytelling Show, and she's the host of NPR's Ask Me Another. Please give a big round of applause for Ophira Eisenberg.
I have exactly the same story, so this is going to be weird. No. I just received a Facebook message. I would say email, but that's not true. It's a Facebook message from an ex-boyfriend. And, you know, this is an ex-boyfriend I dated actually before there was Facebook, so we actually weren't meant to ever stay in touch. And he sent me a Facebook message that said, I'm moving to New York. I know, exciting already. And you're like, sucker. And he was like, do you have a suggestion of a fun, low-key, affordable event I could go to for New Year's Eve? That is amazing naivete, is it not? I was like, yes, I do. I also have the secret to happiness, and I know where to find your soulmate, and the magic ingredient to make all vegan baking edible. New Year's Eve, I feel like, is an interesting task in this town, and I've lived here over a decade, and it is tough, obviously, just with where to live and where to get a job and how to get around and who are your people. But even there's other things that you forget about that you learn are just tough here because of the huge amounts of people. Like when someone's like, let's go for brunch at Sunday at noon. Or why don't we grab a cab? It's 4 p.m. Or how would you like to go to this outdoor concert? That sounds like fun. All of those things require strategic planning over the course of a couple months. You need a team to lower your expectations, a flask. Like, you need a lot of things to accomplish this stuff. And I didn't know that, and thank God I didn't know that. I feel like you have to move here with a level of delusion like the guy that just wrote me, do you have a fun, affordable, easy suggestion for New Year's Eve in New York City? Yes, of course I do, just to be able to get through it. Now, I've tried many things for New Year's Eve here, and I would say they were all failures. I have tried working on New Year's Eve. I performed, so I've tried that, doing like stand-up, a show where everyone in the audience is like, please be funny because we're paying a lot of goddamn money. Like, it's very high pressure, and at the end, they get their one glass of champagne that was advertised with their ticket, and they are not happy. I have tried going to bars where you end up just with a lot of people you never wanted to be around, and I have gone to people's apartment where everyone thinks that's the answer, and you're all jammed in to someone's small space, because we all live in small spaces, kind of like cranking your head out the window to smoke a cigarette at midnight, because everyone's decided that none of your New Year's resolutions are going to come true. But I did not know that. I lived in, I'm from Canada. I know I walk amongst you undetected. And when I was living, I'd never been to New York, and I was going to university in Montreal at McGill, Harvard of the North. Only people at McGill say that, by the way. And I had a friend who was here going to FIT, taking pattern making and fashion design and living in New York. And just that in itself, to me, made her a celebrity. Like, I just so looked up to her because that sounded amazing. You're going to fashion school in New York? I had never been, and we were talking on the phone all the time. She was a very good friend, and she suggested, why don't you come down to New York, take the train down for New Year's Eve? And I was like, oh my God, stars in my eyes. This is the mid-90s. And so I did it. I got on the Amtrak and I came down, and I didn't know what to expect. I was like, I'm gonna get mugged on the street while sparkles fly in the air. Like, that's sort of how I pictured, like, rough but beautiful. And I got there, she was living in this tiny little apartment in the East Village, which of course I didn't have to live in except for 2 days, so I thought it was quaint and adorable. And with like 17 cats and one roommate. And you know, they had a dishwasher, which now it seems crazy, but they had a dishwasher that didn't work, so it would just overflow, and that's when they cleaned the floor. You know, and this was all normal. And Megan was very stressed about what we were going to do for New Year's Eve, which I didn't understand. And I was like, let's just go to like some cool bar around the corner and just hang out. And she was like, we can't do that. And I didn't understand why that was. But through like some calls and this or that, we ended up with an invitation. It was just on a green piece of paper, an invitation to a party that was in Times Square area. But she said, we're going to go to a party in Midtown. I didn't know what Midtown was. I was like, great, sounds wonderful. And she was like, it's going to be kind of hectic. And I was like, whatever, I'm ready for it. And so we got all dressed up. She was like, there will be no cabs tonight. You know, there's all these restrictions all the time that I just didn't understand. I was like, okay, fine. I felt so stupid, but we took the train there on the subway. I believe it was the N, or maybe it was the 4. But I just remember being on the subway being like, wow, look at all the different kinds of people. Because, you know, Montreal, although somewhat ethnically diverse, just doesn't hold a candle to New York. And also the people on the subway during New Year's Eve, you know, are a collection of some of us and tourists. I mean, it really is kind of amazing. And so we're taking the train there. We get off, and as you know, Times Square is always barricaded off because of Times Square New Year's Eve activities. And so I'm like, well, what are we supposed to do? And she goes, no problem. And we are showing this invitation, which is just a piece of paper photocopied, to the cops. And they are going, no problem, and letting us through like it's a CSI thing, you know, like we are going to investigate a murder. And we are getting towards this apartment. And I'm starting to understand that we are not just in Midtown. We are in Times Square. Like, this apartment building was in the middle of Times Square. I think it was on 44th and Broadway. I actually don't know if it's still there. I've never gone back to look because I had no sense of what was going on. And it was a luxury building. And the party was being thrown by people at the time that were our age, so in their 20s. We walk in, a doorman who's wearing a top hat hands us a glass of champagne, bubbly something, and directs us to the elevator. And I am going, wow, this is so cool. This is where your friends live. And I didn't know about the concept of a trust fund kid because it doesn't really exist in Canada. So as we're riding up this elevator to the penthouse, I'm thinking, look at that. If I work really hard, one day I can live here and have this. And the door opens up right into the apartment. And it's this amazing apartment. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, even since. It was all very white. There was a lot of bathed in white thing, and I was like, oh, it's like Celine Dion's place. And lots of cool people that were very good looking. And you know, I remember that the bathroom had a heated floor, so everyone was taking off their shoes and like walking on the heated floor. But they were all welcoming and nice and chatty and friendly. And although I just thought everyone was so much higher status and more sophisticated than I was, they really made me feel like I belonged. Also, probably because I didn't know anything about cocaine. And it was such an amazing feeling. And it was getting close to midnight, and there was a terrace. And we all went out on this terrace that was almost eye line with the ball. And it is about to drop, and we're all just like, and it was quite cold outside, and so we're all just kind of huddled together, all these people I don't know in fancy clothing, and we're counting, and we're screaming together, and the ball drops, and it was like, Happy New Year! And some guy grabs me. He kind of looks like Benicio del Toro. I mean, it was the mid-90s. Maybe it was Benicio del Toro. And he like kisses me, and I'm like literally swept off my feet, and I look at him, and he goes, isn't kissing just kind of fun? And I was like, that is so evolved. Like, that is what New Yorkers are like, right? They don't think of like making out as some sort of emotional thing. It's just for amusement. That's how ahead of it they are. And the confetti falls, but because it's so cold, it really does look like sparkles and sequins are falling from the sky around us. And everyone starts chanting, we're in the center of the world. We're in the center of the world. And I'm screaming it with them and thinking in my mind, oh my God, I'm going to move to New York. And this is what New Year's Eve is going to be like every year. Thank you.
Ophira Eisenberg, thank you so much. Yes. Sincere applause, indeed. I think what I took away most from that story was just, in a way, how adorably naive and innocent Canadians are. I mean, there's no trust fund kids. Everybody has the exact same amount of money. What is this cocaine substance that you somehow invented? There's the right amount of ethnically diverse people in Canada. It's just kind of an adorable place. Thank you for fulfilling all the stereotypes. Everyone that I've known from Harvard, and that's not many people, but they do refer to it as the McGill of the South. By the way, if you ask somebody from Harvard, he or she will say, I went to the McGill of the South. So there's no shame in that whatsoever. It's a point of pride here. Next up, we have for you Jim O'Grady. He is a reporter for WNYC. He doesn't want me to say this because it's kind of a sexy beat, but he used to be the transportation reporter. So I'm going to talk him up for him because he's just a little bit too modest to say it himself. His stories have been heard. You're not going to hit me or anything, are you? Possibly. Okay. His stories have been heard This American Life, and he can be regularly seen performing at the Moth. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Jim O'Grady.
Thank you, David Martin. Thank you. It's weird. David invited all of us after the show for lattes. I think I'm getting a sore throat. I don't think I can.
Well, we could do like something honey in there.
Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. So, Marco the butcher is standing across the counter from me, and he's holding a vial of deep red liquid. And he says to me, "You take this and you drink it." And I say, "Marco, what is it?" And he says, "You drink it, you find out." Marco and I are great friends. This is what he does. He pushes uncontrolled substances on me. This is what he loves to do. For example, there's a giant salami hanging over his head. His butcher shop, the family deli, is one of like 20 shops in this giant expanse of shops under one roof. And this salami is the center of attention. Every politician in New York eventually stands under it and gets their photo taken. And it's huge, and it's really suspiciously colored, like it should not look like that. And Marco's always saying to me, "Take a slice, take a slice, take a slice of the salami. It's 30 years old." And I would say, "Marco, it's not wine, it's meat." And just last week, I saw you standing here with the mayor, and you told him it was 40 years old. And he said, "So what? What's the difference? What is the difference?" Because this is what Marco does. He offers. He offers you liquid. He offers you salami. He offers you cocaine from his cousin Angelo. Because this is New York City during the Bronx's burning era. This is the 80s. And Marco and I are both in our young 20s. The difference is, I've been raised in Westchester County, and I've come out of it like a veal calf. Spindly, sheltered, nearsighted. And I just have this enormous sense of my own ignorance. I know I don't know stuff, but I don't know what that stuff is, which is how ignorance works. So I'm here in the Bronx, and I just have this feeling that here's a place I've come to maybe learn something. Marco is from the Bronx. He's grown up on Arthur Avenue and working in the family deli, pushing salami. Marco's his great talent is convincing people to try new foods. And when you think about that, what that is convincing you to do something you didn't know that you wanted to do. And Marco is great at doing that, especially with women. Young women, middle-aged, old, unmarried, married women, they all come to see Marco. And Marco trains them to widen their palates. So now Marco is holding the vial. And he says, "Didn't you tell me you have a date this Friday night?" And I say, "Yeah." He says, "This is 100% pure bull's blood. I offer it to you as a friend." And even then, I don't take it because I'm a weenie. That's what I am. I'm a weenie. So Marco says, "All right, listen. The other day, I had a date. I drank some of this, and later that night, I'm banging this chick. I got to stop, look down, and just admire myself." So I took the vial, put it in my pocket, left the market, crossed the street, went into the lobby of my tenement building. There's Hector. Hector says, "Yo, we're on the roof." I follow him up. We get out to the roof. There's Luis. Hector and Luis are best friends. This is their spot. Hector is like this tall, goofy guy with curly hair, and he's always grinning for no reason. And Luis is totally different. He's very serious. He lives in my building. He's married to Marisol. They have 2 little girls who sometimes come over to my apartment and then they play. But this is their spot, the roof. It's where they go. They chill out. They smoke a little weed when they have it. They look out over the landscape of the Bronx with the columns of smoke, and they talk about their lives. And now and then they let me join them. And on this day, I don't know why, Luis is kind of tense. They're talking about, times are tight for these guys. It's a constant hustle. They get government checks sometimes. Often they'll go out after midnight to Mashulu Parkway and strip the abandoned cars, and then at dawn they'll sell the parts to the auto shops on Jerome Avenue. It's always a push and a fight to get enough money. So Luis seems a little tense this day. I don't know why. And sort of apropos of nothing, he says, you know what? I gotta have meat in my meal. I don't care if it's a chicken wing. If there's meat in there, I don't feel poor. And then Hector cracks a joke about Luis's meat that I find funny, but Luis does not, which is a little unusual. And then again, sort of out of nowhere, Luis says, and ain't nobody take food off of my plate. Nobody. So now it's Friday night, and I'm getting ready for my date. I got the vial in my pocket, and there, all of a sudden I hear this enormous building racket outside on the street. I go to the window, I look down, and there are just police cars everywhere and people. So I leave the apartment, and bang, there's a cop right in the hallway. And he says, return to your apartment or exit the building. So I go down, and I go out, and there's a crowd, and there's lights, and I see Roberto. He's this retired cop who every day goes to the bodega and he reads the Daily News. He's always hanging out. He knows what's going on. And I say, Roberto, what's the story? This is the story. Luis got home early from his new job as a security guard, walked in, found Hector and Marisol in bed. Luis turned around, went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, returned, and stabbed Marisol in the neck. And right then, the door of the apartment building opens, and there she is on the stretcher and with paramedics, and they sort of bump her down, put her in the ambulance, close the door, and it speeds away. And I said to Roberto, why? Why did Luis stab his wife when it was Hector, when it was the man who betrayed him? And Roberto knows where I'm from. Roberto knows that I'm ignorant. So he said, listen, it's the man's job to try. It's the woman's job to say no. Those are the rules. Hector knew it. Luis knew it. Marisol knew it. She got what she deserved. And I found out a couple weeks later that she survived, and she and her daughters moved away. Luis went to prison. Hector went somewhere. And Marco, the butcher, went to Hollywood, where he got an agent, had sex with her, got bit parts in movies, tried stand-up comedy, and he lasted about 2 years. And then he told me all this when he returned to work the counter at his family's deli on Arthur Avenue. And it reminded me of that day 2 years before and how a couple of weeks had passed after that. And I had reached in my pocket and pulled out the vial. I never drank it. And the blood was curdled. So I threw it away. Thank you.
Jim O'Grady. Thank you, Jim. Jim, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I kind of zoned out near the last third when the policeman started talking, so I'm guessing it was a very funny ending, which everything worked out fine. I did come back with, when Marco did stand-up, next time you tell the story, it should be like, and Marco became Richard Lewis, or something like that, you know, and it's like a Paul Harvey. Rest of the story, you're in radio, Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey, anybody? Should I retire the Paul Harvey bit? Okay, well, he was, I guess there goes the Paul Harvey bit. Note to self, Paul Harvey not playing anymore. That used to kill, by the way. That was Jim O'Grady. Thank you so much, Jim. Honestly, just work on changing who Marco is. last but not least, we have Adam Wade, who has thoroughly just taken off all of his clothing because of the heat. He is an 18-time MOTH SLAM champion, although he has told me he's actually a 20-time MOTH SLAM champion because he's counting two things that normally I don't know. I don't care about record keeping. I don't care how many times you've won something, but you know, it's important to certain people who don't have a lot of things in their lives. And Adam's one of those people. But also, by the way, I don't have cooties, and I am taking Valtrex for my oral herpes. You can use, I don't have oral herpes. I might, I've never been tested. But you can use this microphone. You know, everybody's used, I mean, I'm sitting over there, and it is a little bit, you know, I don't have any. You can, you know, it'd make me feel a bit better. Anyway, Adam Wade, 18-time awesome. And check out his Tumblr account, Sundays with Marie, where he documents his landlady out in Hoboken, Marie, who takes care of him. She makes him meatballs, because even though he's a grown man, I guess can't take care of himself. So Sundays with Marie, it's on Tumblr. It's actually really fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Adam Wade.
It's great to be here. So I grew up in New Hampshire, and thank you. And I went to a small school, Keene State College in New Hampshire. So I spent like the first 22 years of my life in New Hampshire, and I always dreamed of leaving and moving to New York. And I was like, I have a lot of problems. I have baby lungs. I'm asthmatic. I get a lot of anxieties. I'm a nervous person. But that was my dream. And my senior year in college, I was home for break, and I was at church. I'm Greek, so I was at the Greek church, and that's when I started telling people, because people would be like, when you graduate, what are you going to do? And I started saying, I'm going to New York City. And like the reaction was just laughter, and people would laugh, and they like, yeah, but you're no, and like you don't know anybody, and then there was the one person who I really wanted to like impress, and her name was Penny Cara George, and like her family owned like the photo place like in my town. Everybody got their photos developed from, and so I'm like at church, and we had my little communion, and I walked over to her, and she's a pretty girl. She was like my age, and she's like, so what are you going to do when you graduate? And I go, I'm going to New York City. And there was like a long pause, and then she started laughing, and she said, you're so silly, Adam. You're so silly. And I like lit a fire under my ass, and like I don't want to say like Rocky theme nonstop, but I had the rock, like I'm doing it. I'm fucking doing it. You know, I'm going to do it, and you're not going to laugh. And you're going to respect me. You're going to have respect for me. And everybody in this community. So when I graduated, the day of my graduation, I missed my graduation because I wanted everybody to know I was serious. And so nobody applauded for me. I was on the Greyhound bus with people that smelled like pee. And I had my backpack and my guitar and a bag with sheets. So when I got here, I lived at NYU for the first 3 months in the dorms, and I got a job, fortunately, at Virgil's Barbecue in Times Square, and it was a huge break, and I met like a lot of nice people. And then they helped me get housing after those 3 months ended in Fairview, New Jersey. I lived in a nice basement apartment at the bottom of a hill next to a cemetery. So it was pretty much the most depressing living situation you could possibly imagine. And when it rained, we would get flooded from the ground and then the water from down the hill. It was great. Every time it rained, I'd have panic attacks. But I was there and I was doing it. And I wanted to get into TV. I wanted fame. And so every other week, I'd work doubles on Wednesdays at Virgil's, and you'd have like a half hour in between shifts, and I would print up a resume on my little brother word processor, and I would walk to 30 Rockefeller Center, and I'd go into the mezzanine, and I'd drop off a resume for the Page program. Every other week for 2 years. I never heard back. And then I did, and I got this phone call, and they said come in for an interview, and I got really excited, and I dressed up as best I could. And the big question that they asked me was, name 3 adjectives that best describe yourself. And I said hardworking, considerate, and determined. And that was good. They were impressed, and so I got the job. I became like an NBC page, and this was like huge. So when you're a page, like you do tours, you have to do tours around 30 Rock, and then you have like these assignments, and it's like a glorified internship. So you go to these different places, and it's like dog eat dog, because you have like 50 other pages that want these like 5 positions. So I wanted I love Conan, so I wanted to be the page at Conan, and so I went for it 3 times, and the first 2 times I didn't get it, and the third time I didn't get it either. But then that person that got it, I was the bridesmaid, and the person that got it ended up getting a different job. So the opening came, and then I got it. So I was like, this is it. Like I'm doing it. So when you're a page at Conan, you're like the studio page, so it's the 3rd floor. You're everybody's bitch, and they have like a call sheet. You're at the very bottom with your extension, and you have like a little, and like the crew could be kind of mean. They would do like a lot of pranks, and the first thing they did, what I learned was my little desk was on wheels, so when I would show up every day, the desk wouldn't be there, and there's. In 30 Rock, it's a big building, if you've seen it. They would not tell me which elevator, but they would put it on a elevator. So for the first like hour and a half of I would have to get in early, and I would have to try to find my desk in the building. And like Max Weinberg would be like, where's my ice from my hands? I got to soak. And I'm like, Max, I'll be right there. I got to get my fucking desk. All right, thank you. And then your ice. All right, desk, then ice. Thanks, Max. Keep drumming. Brick. Then the other thing they did was, and there was like the 2 guys were like the head of the crew that would do these pranks, and there were the sound guys. It was Randy and Jimmy, and they would. They stapled my, like sport coat, you're supposed to, as a page, you're supposed to be presentable, so you always have to wear your page jacket, and like I'd sweat because I'd be running around trying to do everything and do it fast. So one day I was like sweating, and I put it on the chair, and I went back to get my jacket, and they put about 300 staples into my jacket, so I couldn't get my jacket. And then there's pages you're a page for like 2 months, and then they move on to the next page. So I'm trying to do everything to last here and make some type of impression. So I made up like these really nice like it was a photo of me holding an Emmy, and when I was like a week almost done my page trip, I had like a picture of me, and I would write to everybody, thank you for everything, Adam Wade, your page. And so there was a stack at the desk, and one day when they were stealing the desk, Randy and Jimmy, they took one of those, and they wrote, Dear Conan, I've been pissing in your coffee for the last 10 weeks. Go fuck yourself, Adam Wade. And like I'm smiling, and they put it under his door, and Conan, he was not pleased at that. But thank you. Where were you? Okay, but like the one thing they did was they gave me like a lot of attention. I never got mad. I mean, I cried sometimes, but I never like got mad, like fight them. They're like, you're a good boy, and so like the one thing like I would ask them, and they knew what I wanted was I always carried around this little disposable camera, and I wanted to just take photos of everything and kind of chronicle like my life in New York. And so they let me take 3 photos of me with the disposable camera with 3 big celebrities. So it was Regis, Al Roker, and Conan himself, and we were like together. And this was like my prized possession, and it was like gold, and I could have developed it in Fairview, New Jersey, or in New York, but I was like, fuck this, like I'm waiting, and when I go home for Christmas, that's when I'm getting it like developed. So I dropped it off at Penny, the bitch that laughed and said I was silly, at her family's photo thing. And it was like a 1-hour photo place, I went back 3 days later because I wanted everybody to look at the photo. And like our church community was very gossipy. Everybody knows everybody's business and stuff. Well, let them all know. They laughed. Let them all know Adam Wade, he's a success. So when I walked in like 3 days later, a little cocky. I had a little swagger, okay? And I felt good. And And Penny was there. She looked very pretty, and she's like, "Oh, Adam Wade's here. I heard, you're in New York City. I heard you're doing well." And I'm just kind of like, "Yeah, you heard right." And I was like, "Yeah." And like other people there start looking, and I'm like, "But you got to understand something, Penny. You got to understand something. It's the little people that make the world go round. That's what I'm learning. It's not all the big celebrities that you meet." And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And more, like everybody that's possibly working there all like out now, like looking at me. And I go to pay for the photos. And I look at the envelope, and the envelope's all wrinkled. And it makes me feel really good. So like everybody's looking at the photos. And then like Adam Wade, he came home, he did it. And I know they're going to be talking about this for years. Slow news day, I might get in the paper. Who knows? So I take the photos, and I go back into my mother's car. I'm going to drive home. And I'm in the parking lot. I'm like, "Come on. Just for yourself, look at the photos, feel good." I'm like, you're right. I was talking to myself. So I open it up and I start looking. There's me and Conan, we're smiling. And then there's like me and Al Roker, and we're like thumbs up each. And then with Regis, and we're pointing at each other. And it's nice. And I look at the next photo, and I'm expecting to see like the Christmas tree. And there's a photo of, so I don't recognize this photo. It's a photo of like a man, and he's at at the mechanic's place, the garage, and he's naked, and he's on like the thing that you put the car up, and his balls, and then there's the mechanic, but he's also naked, but he's got a lot of grease on him, and he's got like what you jump a car when the battery on his testicles, and they seem like they're very much enjoying each other. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I go to the next photo, and it's a different situation. It's a house, and there seems to be a problem with the sink. And there's a plumber there with like chaps, and he's naked, so you can see his rear, and he's with a wrench, he's fixing pipes, and then there's a man who seems like a house husband, and he's holding a big pipe, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And like I go, I don't know what and I'm like looking around if anybody's looking, and then I rip them up, and then I throw them in the garbage, and I go back into the car, and I'm like freaking out. I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I go home, and my mother's there, and I'm like shaking. She's like, "You ready for dinner? We're gonna go to Athens," and Athens is like a nice Greek restaurant in my town. I go, "No, we're not going there. We're not going there. Hello, no, just a grilled cheese. You guys go. Just make me a grill. I want to just be home." And she's like, "All right, but tomorrow, church. You're gonna do communion." I go, "No more church. No more church for Adam. I'm atheist now. I'm gonna tell you now. I'm an atheist. So no more church for Adam." So 2 years later, I'm working at NBC Sports on like a Saturday afternoon, and I'm doing like scripts there, and I'm making, I make a lot of scripts. When I say scripts, photocopies, I'm making a lot of people photocopies and getting a lot of people coffee. It's an important job. And Randy and Jimmy, to pick up extra hours, they're always working sound for them, for NBC Sports to supplement their income. So they're there, and we're in the hallway, and we're just talking, and I had just gotten them 2 coffees, so we're sitting there, and like whenever like a pretty page walks by, they'll always, like, to flirt with them, they'll always talk about me, and it kind of like cockblocks me, but they'll say like all the pranks. So there's this really gorgeous like page, and she walks by, and is like, "Come here, Ginny, come here. You got to meet Adam Wade." I'm like, "Hey, hi, nice to meet you." And they're like, "This guy was the best page." And she's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, when he was here, we used to put his desk, like when he was at Conan, we'd put his desk on the elevators, and he'd have to run around." And she starts laughing, and she doesn't seem as interested in me, And then it goes, and then one time we stapled his jacket to the chair, and I'm like, "Oh boy." And then they're like, "Yeah, we wrote this like go fuck yourself to Conan, and we put it under the door with his picture on it." And then like, "Remember the time we took your disposable camera and we went into the prop department and we took the photos of the gay porn?" And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah." I go, "Guys, it was you?" And they're like, "Yeah." I go, "You don't understand. Like, I took that disposable camera and I went and I got the pictures developed in my hometown. And Penny, the family, the Greek family that I was trying to oppress, and like it ruined me. And they're like, are you for real? And I'm like, yes, like that wasn't good. And they're like, no way, that's like the greatest thing ever. I go, no, it's not the greatest thing ever. They're like, you're a legend. I'm like, that's not why I want to be a legend for that type of thing. And they're like, no, you're awesome. And I'm like, okay. All right, thank you.
Adam, baby lungs, wait, everybody. He does. He does have baby lungs. We've all met with his pulmonologist. So you don't, let me see if I understand this. You don't remember taking those photos? Is that the? But so you took these photos, but then you just didn't even remember that you took them. But, so you just, okay, but you just didn't even remember that I was just trying to understand the plot of the story, so you just didn't remember, and then multiple disposable cameras or something. Yeah, that's a shame. You know, they would say pride goeth before the fall. You got a little bit uppity about yourself in New York as opposed to Manchester, so maybe you deserve that, you know, being taken down a notch. I know everybody else here was going, oh, but, you know, maybe the real lesson at it was, you know, you deserved that. Okay? Just mull it over tonight, you know, just a little morality play. I think they sound like great people to work with. What a wonderful, wonderful environment. No, they did, and that's always the best way to show love is by ridicule and abuse and belittlement. Yeah, that's how people really know that they're loved. So it's good that you have a healthy sense of self like that. Yeah, well, that's why. I think you could substitute Van Alen Institute for NBC Page program, and it's probably the same hijinks. No, I'm not. I don't want a lawsuit on my hands. I'm just, you know, this mic is amazing. It's like Crabtree and Evelyn over here. God, I can understand why everybody's using this. It's like a Sephora store. My God. It's like the cheese section of Murray's Cheese. It's like Roquefort. God. That's a type of cheese, Adam. Don't worry about it. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Well, that was our show. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on out, for braving the weather outside and the artificial weather inside. This is all just actually a prank show. We're called Weather Extremes. We have cameras all over the place. No, this really was an all-true storytelling show. We do this show every month at the Upright Citizens Brigade. Our next show is next Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the Chelsea Theater. We're on Facebook, Nights of Our Lives. We are so unobtrusive, you won't even know that we're there. If you want to find out about future shows at all, that's the best thing to do. And we're also on breakthroughradio.com. It's THRU Radio. They archive all of our past shows if you are a masochist and you want to listen to something we've done in the past. But thank you so much. You guys were a fantastic audience. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. And thank you to the Van Alen Institute for having us do this nonsense up here. Thank you. Have a great night.